Colin Farrell, Senior Partner at Colin Farrell Timms, and we're very pleased to be a co-sponsor of the SEC2023 conference. So I think it's a nice opportunity. It always seems to be a place that people are very happy to talk to you. There's no hard pressure sales or hard pressure networking. It's a very sort of collaborative environment to meet people and chat about what's going on. And I think also a lot of the clients I've spoken to, I think find it very reassuring speaking to their own peers in other associations to understand that the challenges they face aren't necessarily unique, and I think there's a certain assurance about that. I think in recognising that the demand and the appetite for data and more data and better data, recognising that's growing and growing, we've been starting to think about, are there ways of doing this that's a bit more innovative? Are there any solutions we can make better use of technology? And we're starting to look at AI a little bit, whether there's any opportunity for AI to come in to do a bit more work around validating images or data that we hold and so on. I find that a bit terrifying, frankly, because I'm not of the young generation to do that, but I think that's something we are starting to look at. And I think certainly the sector, as the sector's demands and appetite for gathering more information and recording information about its asset, about how the asset performs, about where you have damp and mold issues, where you have inherent defects and so on, I think there's definitely a growing appetite and a growing interest in trying to use technology to try to predict these sort of defects in certain types of properties. And so we're looking into that to see whether that's something we can move into. We've seen a massive shift between clients working on the basis of having small sample sets of data to wanting comprehensive data on all of their assets. So what that means for us is that we've gone from doing 20% sample surveys of a portfolio to 100% surveys of stock, which in a way creates some opportunity for efficiencies because you can send a surveyor to an estate for a week rather than for a day, and there's some inherent efficiencies in delivering the services in that way. So the breadth of data that we've been asked to collect has increased, and there's a lot of driver across the sector for that. But I think also there's an increasing shift now for depth of information, and clients are wanting more granularity of data. And granularity is a word that the regulator for social housing is using quite a lot when it comes to understanding about what assets are, how they perform. And I think lots of organisations have struggled a bit in recent years in having access to the sort of level and depth of data to inform things like SHDF bids, to understand, for example, what properties are built of a certain construction form, where there's rack in construction and so on. So we're starting to see a greater ask of stock condition surveys in particular, but also the appraisals and the work that comes off the back of stock condition surveys. So I see more of that work coming through, and I see a greater appetite for capturing more information at that survey point. But I also think that has to be accompanied by better quality systems, better software, more accessible, more easily maintainable data systems. And I think we're still a little way off that generally in the sector. There is so much work to be done across the housing stock today, and that will only get bigger and bigger as the stock continues to age. The issue, I think, is around the uncertainty around the affordability of doing this work, because we're still in a situation where demand outstrips supply, costs are still rising, maybe not as rapidly as they were a couple of years ago. And there is some comfort in the fact that the inflation figures generally are starting to come down, and that will start to ease the pressures, and hopefully the rents won't be capped to the same extent they were a couple of years ago. So I think that's going to ease the pressure on our clients in terms of the affordability gap. But I still think there are so many things coming through in terms of disrepair and just planned maintenance and compliance. And of course, that's before you start getting on to decarbonisation and so on. And one of my concerns is that with so many conflicting priorities, the reality of achieving all of those things over the next decade or so is seriously challenging. And so one of my concerns is that there just won't be enough funding available to deliver all the work that is needed. And without that certainty earlier on, firms like ours can't really take a huge leap of faith in investing in bringing in lots more people in anticipation. I mean, if you think that it takes us between 5 and 7 years to get a really good, competent building surveyor ready to go and deliver these projects, even if we started today, we're going to be hot on the heels of 2030 by the time that person's ready. I think the sector as a whole, with the supply chain and of course our clients, need some certainty earlier about where the funding is going to come from, whether it's going to be government backed, whether it's going to be somehow venture capital backed or whatever. But I think we do need some certainty in order to make that investment now for the next decade. I don't think it's a problem, but I think that there has to be an acceptance that this is a very complicated area, and our clients are businesses at the end of the day, and of course they have to balance all of these conflicting priorities.